Hi, everyone, and welcome to the final part of our three-part webinar series on record keeping for production management, keeping production data to improve the supply chain, where we will be discussing the value of keeping genetic records and how to use them on farm and beyond. I am Sydney Fortier, a Research and Innovation Coordinator for the BCRC, and I will be your moderator this evening. We are so happy to be able to put on these webinars for free through the Knowledge Dissemination and Technology Transfer Project funded by the Canadian Beef Cattle Checkoff and Canada's Beef Science Cluster. As mentioned up top, this is part 3 of a 3-part series. So if you're interested in checking out the first 2 parts, you can find those recordings on our website, beefresearch.ca, or on our YouTube channel, which is Beef Research. So feel free to submit your questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we will have a Q&A panel session at the end of this webinar where these questions will be addressed live. We ask that if you do have any questions, please put them in there. They can get kind of lost in the chat function, so it just makes it easier to roll out when the time comes. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to that recording will be sent to all of those who have registered, even those who were unable to attend live. So before we get started, I wanted to introduce you guys to a new initiative by the BCRC, the Cow-Calf Record Keeping course. So it is open for pre-registration now. It is a 6-part online course that the BCRC is launching this spring, and the course will walk you through the process of successful record keeping. You can turn information into action as you learn how to collect and save data so that it can be analyzed and used to make better decisions. The content will be emailed to you in digestible bites every few days. It will provide a brief overview with links to supporting information on why to keep records, which record keeping system you should use, how to set goals and level up, and turning your information into action. So I will provide that link in the chat for those who are interested in pre-registering. But without further ado, we have a great lineup of panelists here this evening with Bruce Niznik, Betty Jo Almond, and Virgil Lowe. I will introduce them separately as they're about to present, and then we'll hear from them in their 10-minute presentations. So without further ado, I am going to stop sharing my screen and introduce our first speaker, Bruce Niznik. So Bruce Niznik farms and ranches 12 miles west of Brooks, Alberta in Antelope Creek with his wife Jody and 3 daughters. Bruce went to school in Brooks and attended Lethbridge College, graduating with an Ag Tech Beef Management diploma. He is 4th generation on the farm, working alongside his brother, dad, and uncle, raising Black Angus cattle and crops on irrigated ground. They are also a producer partner with Brant Lake Wagyu, crossing their Angus genetics with Wagyu. The only off-farm influence in their cattle is their bull battery, and Bruce believes that carcass data is key to improving herd quality and sources out superior genetics. Bruce is a former Alberta Beef Producers Delegate, was a guest speaker for Carcass 101, and a longtime board member of their local grazing association. Niznik Farms has proudly won the Calgary Stampede Farm Family Award and most recently the Certified Angus Beef Canadian Commitment to Excellence Award. So please join me in welcoming Bruce.
Hello, I welcome all you to this. I guess most of what she covered, I'm going to recover a little bit of that. We're a cow-calf operation with a background in lot here west of Brooks. Our cows run on irrigated grass and a native mix. We graze standing corn in the winter and try to feed for about 30 days before we turn our cows out onto banked grass to calve in the middle of April. About 60% of our cow herd is bred to Angus bulls, and our heifers and the cattle we don't want to keep replacements out of are bred into the Wagyu program for Brant Lake Wagyu. The commercial Angus calves are marketed in liner loads through video auction, and that's how we keep our EU compliance. Now, as she said, all new genetics come into our herd through our bulls. our philosophy is kind of like the herd is an upside down funnel, where if you're really picky about what comes in the top, what goes out the bottom of the funnel then is going to be above average and should be good cattle for you if you're super picky on what goes in the top. Keeping production management records, we do not keep individual cow records. We kind of feel that our purebred breeders need to micromanage their cows, and that allows us to manage at a cow herd level and improve on a cow herd level rather than trying to do it with individual cows. Now, in my record keeping, my calving book is probably one of my most important books, I guess, because that tells me the cows that we've had trouble with. And we've always found that cows that have temperament or calving problems, or a calf doesn't suck, if you deal with it, you're going to deal with it again. So our philosophy is, if we touch it, we call it. Now, after kind of 25 years of that philosophy, we only handle about 0.5% of our cows and calves, or our heifers and our cows, during calving season, with malpresentations being almost the only reason that we have to handle an animal. Calving book also lets us look at our some of the production, like our first cycle conception, as well as like it'll indicate to us whether we're starting to have a problem or something that we're doing is giving us trouble in that. If we're not in the 70 to 80% range, we look for something that caused that, whether it be heat related or bull related, or if we see a gradual decline over a few years with nothing that we can pinpoint, we're going to look elsewhere and consult our vet with that. Our weaning weights, we kind of keep a herd weaning weight, because weaning weights fluctuate in our area so much due to grass conditions during the summer. And basically the weather when you wean has such an influence on them that we kind of just look for a steady improvement in our weaning weights. And that's kind of all the production records we keep. Now, the records we keep for marketing, vaccinations are extremely important for us. The buyers for our cattle are looking for specific types of vaccine in them. And we're precise when we describe the cattle when they're selling. A full herd health program tells the buyer absolutely nothing about what's gone into your calves. You need to be telling them like Zoetis Select Vac Gold. And if you're selling replacement heifers or something, Zoetis Select Vac Gold with the fetal protection. That allows the feedlots to know that they're eligible for some 0% BRD programs when they buy your calves, and it doesn't scare them off of them. We use our vaccine rep, Steve Brander. He knows the feedlots that have contacted him that are looking for the programs, the vaccination programs we're using. And he contacts them whenever we're selling calves, and that keeps the feedlots informed. The genetic records we use for marketing, it's a touchy subject, because you give people genetic information on your cattle, you could hurt or help your sale. When the if cattle just go through the ring, weaning weight indicates what your cow, the weaning weight is evident. So it shows what your cows basically had to eat and how they milked. But to give an order buyer information on what they're going to do post weaning in the feedlot, and then what they're going to do on the rail, or what can be expected on the rail and at the packing plant. Giving genetic information to your potential buyers will allow some of the feedlots target your cattle to go into certain grids if they feel they will fit into them. And they can also tell whether your cattle should be going towards a grid or whether they should just be feeding them for straight up gain and go into the traditional markets with the cattle. Now, us and some other buyers were trying to get our regular buyers who bought our calves for years out of their comfort zone and get them to pay a little more for our cattle. And we were racking our brains on what we could do. So we consulted with our purebred breeder, and we came up with the idea of a feeder calf sale with very similar genetics, with producers that are all kind of doing the same thing on their places. Now, how we conveyed the genetic information to them is originally we did a summary of our bull battery and gave them the EPDs, but that was a lot of stuff to digest. And the Canadian Angus Association, since we're all using 100% Angus bull batteries, they came up with a performance endorsement for us. Now, as you can see on the screen there, it's basically a feeder calf index, and they took the EPDs from marbling, carcass weight, ribeye area, yearling weight, and back fat. They felt that those are the traits that are important for feedlots to look at, and they put it into a comprehensive number that basically tells you whether you're below average, average, or above average, or well above average. And people can target your calves based upon the performance they can expect out of this. If you're just average in marbling, you're not going to go into a quality grid. If you have massive carcass weight and nothing else, you can go into a performance, just a straight up performance with them. So this is how genetics has helped us market our cattle. But one thing you do have that we found is we had to find buyers that were looking for what we were selling. And that took a lot of our purebred breeder and our auction marked rep work doing that. Now, the return on investment from keeping these records, I think your calves you need to market your calves, not just sell them. You have to get the information out to your prospective buyers, maybe targeting specific segments in the feeding industry. Like one of our main buyers at our calf sale is the Bovary lot, and they have an EU program where they want the quality and consistency in the cattle. So they will buy up to half the sale just so that they have very similar cattle. And now there's Eastern buyers and like Wiseman feeders over here, and they target a combination of high performance Angus cattle with carcass quality. Now, how to share the records? It's really tough. Like BICS was a really good idea on telling people what were in your cattle, but the lack of information sharing, I think, led to the lack of use of BICS. So it'll be interesting to see if a program can come out that everyone will take part in. Now, is it worth it to put the time in to do this, and is there a direct benefit? It's really hard to quantify because bidders, they only have to bid a 1/10 of a cent or a 1/4 of a cent more than the previous people who bought your cattle and know how they feed. So it's really hard to quantify when if this information is paying off. But I'm going to have a quote from one of our buyers at our sale. And this isn't from calves we sold, but he said, "The calves we bought out of the Cudlow Angus sale were the most expensive calves I put in the feedlot, and they were our most profitable as well." So he bought calves that he could target into a premium market, and it paid off for him. Thanks for joining us this evening, and I would welcome any feedback on what is working on other ranches and for marketing. and what data collection and whatnot is important to other places. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bruce. That was great. And the end there leads perfectly into our next speaker, Betty Jo Almond. Betty Jo Almond is originally from a commercial beef operation in Eastern Ontario. She graduated from the University of Guelph with an agriculture degree majoring in animal genetics. More recently, she is a graduate of the Advanced Agriculture Leadership Program that focuses on experiential executive leadership. Prior to working at AgSights, she was the program lead for several risk management programs, developing a strong understanding of both business and IT needs, abilities, and limitations. Betty Jo has been with AgSights for over 10 years in various roles related to management solutions and services for beef, sheep, goats, and small to medium-sized meat processing businesses. Betty Jo represents AgSights on the Alpha Phenomics board, specialized in providing disruptive technology solutions for the livestock production industry, veterinarians, and processors. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Betty.
Thanks, Sydney. And I'm just going to enter presenter mode here. So thanks everyone for joining. I'm just going to take a few minutes and talk about record keeping, as that is one of our specialties. A little bit of background behind AgSights. So we originated in 1993, so we are celebrating 30 years this year. And in that time, our original mandate was to focus on genetics and genetics that improved the profitability of the beef herd. So in that time, we have processed genetic evaluations on over 2.6 million cattle. We also provide the dollar profit index for Leachman cattle of Colorado and continue to support the evolution of that marketing tool for those global value-added animals. And then through our partnerships, we've also connected the data collected in cow-calf operations with carcass data, so we can start to figure out the value when you connect that information. We are big on collaboration, and you'll hear a little bit about that in a national collaboration that we are part of in a few minutes. And in that time, we have just over the past 5 years participated in over 7 million in funding in the beef primarily, but also in sheep and goats. And there's a couple academia organizations that we collaborate with as well. So our solutions, we very much start with genetics. That's our core. But in order to do genetics well, you do need to have records to produce that. So we got in the space of on-farm record keeping, and our most recent version of that is BioTrack Plus. And then about 10 years ago, actually, Alberta Agriculture had developed a solution that traced product as it got sold at farmers markets. And it was called Food Inventory Traceability and Sales. We rebranded that as BioLinks. And with a collaboration with VG Meats here in Ontario, added a production piece to it. So now we can continue the story of food and enter the small to medium meat processing facilities and trace that animal as it gets harvested into cuts by first identifying source farm and RFID number on that animal, and then following it through to the cuts that come off of that animal. So I want to touch base on a national collaboration we are working on, and that is CBIN. Hopefully most have heard of it. The first project was a BCRC project, and it was to create a dashboard and in collaboration with the breed association so that we can start to pull in purebred information, but also commercial information, and connect the data and try to demonstrate the value of having a resource where you can find that superior genetics to incorporate into your breeding program. So part of the dashboard is providing some visuals so you know the strengths of the bulls that you are reviewing. And there's a couple graphs there on the bottom. The current work of, there we go. The current work of CBIN is focused on the next evolution of that pilot project. And so that includes source funding through the SCAP program, and also piloting the value to each sector, starting with the cow-calf and following that through to the processor. And the people that will be involved in that project have already been engaged with Sandy Russell at Canadian Beef Breeds Council. This next phase will have a strong focus on the commercial value of showing data across each stage of beef production. And if anyone wants more information, please let us know. So getting back to specific ranch and farm information, one of the offerings that we provide is bull evaluation and heifer evaluation. There's a fair bit of breeders that do home evaluation or private tests. And then in Ontario here, we also have a consignment center that people provide bulls to, and then get the results after a 112-day test. We also provide ultrasound, and that is for seed stock. We do focus on the value of the data that comes from that, and that does look at what does identifying higher marbling stakes bring to your profitability. I'll briefly mention that one of the services that we've piloted and still have very small uptake of is carcass ultrasound. That ultrasound offers almost like a best before. So you put in your marbling targets and goals, and then you scan animals, and the module actually predicts how many more days you should feed that animal in order to reach that target marbling and ribeye size and grade. So as we get into the on-farm record keeping, I'd like to mention just a few slides on BioTrack Plus. So we believe that data has value, and I know that depending on your operation, you may be operating on a herd level, as Bruce mentioned, but when you can identify the animals that do a good job, or those silently strong animals, and the ones that are not doing great for you, and call those, then you can really see some pretty quick advancements in your profitability. So BioTrack Plus enables the tracking of animals right from birth through to sale or death. And there's just a few samples on each of the stages of growth of that animal on the value add that can be provided. We do recognize that not everybody is ready to get on a fully automated or fully digital solution. So we still offer paper records. We integrate with EID readers and scale heads with an import tool. And then again, because all our solutions are web-based, you can enter that real time. We are very proud of being ag data transparent. The data collected on farm is the data that is owned by that farmer. And we are very transparent on any use of that information. It only gets used for aggregate purposes. And the only time that it gets shared is when we have permission to do so on behalf of that breeder. And a good example of that is doing age verification with CCIA, but that does get initiated with an authorization to act on their behalf. So here's a few samples. One of the things we're pretty excited about is the intuitiveness and ease to figure out what's working and be able to quickly drill down on the records that contribute to that data-driven decision that you now need to make. So this is an example of inventory, if we just start there. And if you click on one of those bars, the right side of our screen will actually filter down to the specific animals that are made up of that. And then by clicking the edit column button, you can actually change the data that you're looking at on those animals. Another good example is sale records. You can start to see your trends in sales in relation to counts of animals, but this is fully customizable. You can look at your sale weights, your sale prices, and get a good visual of what's going on, and are you making some improvements in that area. I'm really excited to show this one because this is where you can see some intuitiveness. So right now, this visual is showing you death reasons by year. We've also got that available in a percentage of your herd size. Because if your herd size is changing, you're looking at growth, then you really need to know, is the things that you're dealing with today a bigger issue than what they've been in the past, or is it fairly consistent? And that can help point you in the direction of something that you may need to pay more attention to and try and figure out what's changed to resolve it. Our BioTrack Plus has two different versions to it, Manager and Builder. Builder incorporates genetic evaluations. Our genetic evaluations are across all breeds, so we call it an ABC rather than an EPD. And that's what I mentioned at the very beginning, that we've been generating from early days of being in business. They're updated weekly. And one of the things that we offer through Bull Test is a BioDollar index. That index calculates the greater profit that you can make than average bulls if that bull was bred and you were looking at a sampling of the 20 progeny that came off of it. We can provide more details on that BioDollar index if anyone's interested, but it's a great tool to try and figure out the potential that bull has genetically over average sires and try to gauge the value when you're looking at buying your next herd sire. So no matter what you use at AgSights, we do support you from day one, and that begins with account creation. Everybody learns differently and uses their records differently, and we want to know that up front so that we help you see the value. And then it can be scary to start into a record keeping solution. So having that support to bring records in and be able to look at your own animals and how a record keeping solution can give you value is, I think, very important. So that is one of the things that we offer as well. So I want to thank you and look forward to helping you convert your data into profit.
Thank you so much, Betty. That was great. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce our last speaker. So we have Virgil Lowe. Virgil Lowe has been actively involved in the beef industry his entire life. Currently, he works with Talus Agriculture and Consumer Goods Animal Health Team and manages Granite Cattle Inc., a small cattle feeding company focused on sourcing calves based on historical data. In the past, he has held a variety of roles, including business manager of Verified Beef Production Plus, and prior to that was a lawyer with Denton's Canada LLP in Calgary. Virgil has also maintained various volunteer roles over the past 10 years, including as a Calgary Stampede Agri-Food Committee member and as the chair of the Canadian Beef Industry Conference. Virgil grew up on his family's ranch/feedlot near Nanton, Alberta, where he now lives with his wife, Emily, and daughter, Juniper. So, Virgil?
Thank you, Sydney. I think you should be able to see me now.
You're still a black screen on my end, but maybe it just needs a couple minutes to.
All right. Well, I don't know why that is, so hopefully it comes through soon. Thank you, well, Sydney and Bruce and Betty Jo. The good part about being the last presenter is you can be short because everybody else does such a good job at the beginning. They mostly say everything that's important to say, so appreciate that. Couple of things I'd like to add. I want to talk about our experience through Granite in terms of trying to source and buy and feed cattle based on prior production data. So data collected at the cow, calf, and seed stock levels. And there's sort of one downside and then a couple of positive points. The downside is that in the current environment and the current sort of market dynamics, it is relatively tough to do that at scale. Bruce gave a couple of good examples of some programs that are functioning, and there are a couple more out there. And as a portion of, you know, all the feeder cattle purchased, they're still small. And so it's it's early to say that it's a guarantee, you know, doing some of these things results in more money this fall for calves. However, it is growing. And the reasons that purchasers are starting to look for cattle with some of this information are, you know, many of the things the previous presenters mentioned, such as better information on health, leading to the ability to improve health outcomes at the feedlot, better information on performance, enabling better streaming of cattle into different production programs. And also, I think it's important to note the emerging opportunity with different branded programs as well. So being able to track some sort of a element on cattle across the value chain, enabling a new market for the fed cattle that unlocks some sort of a premium that's not available to the commodity cattle. So those are all positive opportunities from data collection and sharing, yet they're all relatively early. In our experience, we were able to make use of all of them at different times, and to different varying degrees of success. One of the really important factors for the feedlot to be able to utilize that data is its accuracy. And so I think on a lot of these things, accuracy comes from having a large amount of historical high quality data. So one of the messages I'd like to leave is it's whether or not it's a particular operation is able to monetize their data collection practices today, it's still worth starting to do that, because starting that process today will deliver higher quality data, therefore higher quality data insights in the future, which means more accuracy in terms of the performance projections and better results for your future buyer, and therefore more reliability that they're going to come back and want to pay more next year. I can't stress enough the importance of that accuracy driven by you know, as much high quality data as possible, going back as far as possible. Another very important developing feature is the ability to, you know, for relatively low cost, collect that accurate information easier. Betty Jo pointed to a number of technologies, so did Bruce, that are in the market today that weren't not very long ago. And there are many more to point to as well, both software and hardware tools, which are enabling the lower cost data collection at a much more accurate rate. If you guys could see me, I would pick up my cell phone and show it in the camera right now. That's been a technology that's significantly improved the ability to collect data on the cattle production chain, which, you know, that didn't exist 15 years ago. It was new 10 years ago. Everybody has one today. And so that development is continuing, and the ability is just going to keep getting easier and lower cost. But starting 10 years ago will result in less accurate results than starting today. I think, I guess to sum that up, I guess our small entity is still working to continue to build and grow on this principle, and continue to look for high quality animals that their performance projections can be backed up by reliable information. And we think that that's the future for the cattle business. It's going to be challenging to get there, but you know, lots of things are challenging. That's why not everybody does them. And so I do think participating in forums like this and starting on some of these paths of, you know, learning about data collection and learning about accurate record keeping and things is a really good, relatively low cost starting point. to put one on the right path to capitalizing on these future, I very highly suspect, highly valuable opportunities. So with that, I will be quiet and let us move into questions.
Thank you so much, Virgil. Yeah, and with that, that concludes our presentations for the evening, and we are going to be moving into the Q&A session. So if any of you guys have questions that have come up over the course of the presentation, I encourage you to throw them into the Q&A. But for now, I invite our speakers to turn on their cameras, and we will get started with the questions that we do have. So the first question that I have here is, so how can record keeping genetic values provide immediate value to the beef industry, keeping in mind that usually these types of initiatives take a couple generations to see some of that return? Can any of you guys speak to that?
We probably all can to some level, but I don't mind speaking first. So a good example is looking at two different bulls and paying attention to the traits that you need to see improvement in, and finding that right bull that provides that. Because when you focus on where your operational goals are and where you want that to go, focusing on the traits that improve that just end up bringing you more dollars. And the easy one to point out is calving ease. If you've got a calving ease problem, then find a calving ease bull, and you may be able to have a lot more live births, or births where you're not touching them, and then animals aren't making it on that list that Bruce referred to, where they're now not going to be part of your herd, because that's a cost and a time concern that you then need to figure out. That's just the easiest one, but you can get into calculations with weaning weights and post-weaning gains and demonstrate where if you're raising animals that gain faster, then you're feeding them less and you're taking more pounds to market at the end of the day.
Thank you, Betty. Bruce or Virgil, do you have anything to add?
I guess on our place, like the records or the selection we've been doing, it's taken, like we've been kind of on this road for 20 some years, and it's just in the last couple of years where we've found some markets and had the ability to show people what we have in our cattle, to try and extract more money out of them at the cow-calf level. Now, finishing them yourselves and finding grids to go into, that just is not my expertise. So that's kind of why what we've done what we did with them.
Thank you, Bruce. Virgil?
I don't have anything to add, Sydney.
All right, that's great. My next question is for the panel as well. Are there any tools and or services available today that aren't widely used that you guys are aware of that could have great value on farm in terms of genetic record keeping and using that data to create value?
Well, from my perspective, I think most of them, actually, like Betty Jo's tool, and even the tool Bruce pointed to, the feeder calf index through Angus Association. I think many tools aren't widely used, which have value and could be quite quickly.
Yeah, and I think to build on that, Virgil's very right with the phone. 15 years ago, it wasn't really here, and now everyone has one, and that's just one example. Camera technology is drastically improving, and there's examples of facial recognition being used to identify animals, which I think is a game changer, because you're now potentially able to connect that calf to its dam and with DNA testing figure out the sire. But in addition to that, there is more tools that are taking infrared images, like what Alpha Phenomics is doing, and doing weight predictions. And that is installing a camera in your area where you have most of your cattle gathering, and collecting data without you even having to touch or handle those animals. So there's big data in the tractors, and there's big data coming to beef cattle production for sure.
Yeah. I guess some of the stuff that I see that could add value to the farm is stuff we already have. Like you go to bred cow sales, all you get is what they're bred to and the dates they're turned in. You don't have you don't know the quality of bulls that were with those cattle at a sale. And even selling heifers. Potential buyers of replacement heifers, they'd probably love to see the calving ease index that is on those heifers, and it's available through these EPDs, and it's just getting that information out to them. I think we have a hard enough time getting the information we already have into potential buyers, I guess.
Sydney, one more thing I'd add too is the genomic evaluation tools that are available from a number of different companies. Many of them are applicable to commercial herds, and they may not have the same degree of accuracy as a Angus focused genomic evaluation, or some of the targeted indexes and stuff, but they're still a lot better than nothing, and they're relatively cheap and can provide a pretty good place to start, at least if there's none of your own historical data to benchmark against, and then you can use them as part of a broader system and incorporate your own data as you start collecting it.
Mm-hmm.
Just sorting through these questions here. So a little bit on that note, say as a practical question, if I'm a producer and I have these records, but I'm selling at a public auction, is it possible to be able to share those records with the person who's buying my calves, or is it something that needs to be done prior to the auction mart and used as a marketing tool?
I can take a crack at it. It's challenging, quite frankly, if the information isn't shared before the cattle walk through the ring.
Mm-hmm.
It's very challenging. It's just really hard.
Yeah, basically, if you give the information away to the person that's bought your calves, you've lost the potential to have two people compete for your calves. Like, you're basically giving it away for free. And that's the real challenge, is finding people who want that information and will target cattle that have it.
Yeah, and if it's not provided early enough before the time when the buyer has to basically determine their price, they can't use it to determine the price. So that's, the problem with telling the auctioneer to announce it off the block. Unless it's pretty generic, easily understandable and verifiable information, it's quite hard to extract extra value out of it without going any further, without providing it any earlier, I should say.
And I guess, Virgil, do you find video auctions provide you with more information than going to a sales barn and having the auctioneer give his 20-second cut with a knife, full herd health as they walk in the ring?
Yes, in that the information arrives earlier and early enough for us to use it to make price limit decisions. Again, there's a bit of a verifiability issue at times, but at least you get it early enough that you can adjust your sort of your limit price.
And I'll throw a wild idea, sharing what you're doing with your breeding program and maybe doing it through social media and building that relationship. It kind of gets that awareness of the value in the cattle that you're bringing to the ring, and it may drive a greater price. But that's very visible in private auctions when people are coming and buying from you because they believe in your breeding program and they know that you've done the due diligence to highlight the performance ability of each of the animals on auction. So it's a little easier to articulate the value there.
Thank you all for answering that question. We have a question for you, Bruce, but I invite Virgil and Betty Jo to add any sort of comments on this as well. But so with all the improvements you have made in carcass quality, have you considered retaining ownership through the feed yard rather than being at the mercy of buyers?
We have considered that. The real problem that we see with that is there's no quality grids up here in Canada. If we were in the States, and I'm sure we could probably partner with a feedlot who is more familiar with quality grades in the States, but up here, it's not worth chasing the premiums that are available. Like, so we have considered it. And then the other thing, it depends on what calves are worth. Like we're probably not going to entertain the idea of that in the next few falls if calves are worth, if the profit's in the cow calf part of it, we're probably not going to chase a, $150 premium with the chance to lose more than that. So we do entertain it, but I can see us going that way eventually. Yes.
Virgil or Betty, do you have any comments regarding this type of strategy or and
from my perspective, it's it is possible, and we are always willing to do that with interested producers. But it is a different business, and it's hard to achieve some of the necessary production scale and all of that cattle feeders need to survive with owning only your own cattle. So it's relatively risky in terms of marketing, though if they actually are, head and shoulders above the rest of everything else out there in terms of performance, it's probably one of the better ways to capture that value if you can sort of finance the feeding program or portion of it and are willing to accept that additional market risk, that Bruce mentioned earlier.
Yeah. And another thing with that is, the feedlots, the big feedlots, they sell loads every week. Like whenever you take that plunge to feed your own calves, and basically they get sold in, a couple weeks you only have 2 or 3 times when those cattle are going to go to packers. If you're on the bad week, yeah, your whole year can be shot. And I guess that's where in the next few years, we're going to take the profits out of the cow-calf industry if they're there, rather than feeding.
Thank you all. So we have one last question here. So what genetic records are important to keep? And how do those specific numbers help make profitable decisions and potentially help to market? And adding on to that question as well, we heard a little bit about biotracks and stuff. Are there any other options for people to kind of keep track of this data for them to go back and use it at a later date, basically?
I think the quick and easy answer is that yes, there's lots of options out there. We actually give a fair bit of presentations on just looking at your own goals and your own targets and making sure that whatever option you're selecting, it fits into what you're trying to do. A lot of them do lots of things, but you need to look at specifics and also the ease of use and how you're going to incorporate that. Because if it's something that you're going to invest in, then you're going to want it to easily or naturally become part of your routine in order to make it worthwhile.
I guess from our end, the genetic qualities that are important to us, reproduction is still the #1 cow-calf profit driver. So that's first and foremost with us. When you sell cattle through a ring, they still have to look decent. But I guess that's what we found is you can find cattle, you can find good looking maternal cattle everywhere. It's adding on the carcass as well that is the unicorn that we've been kind of chasing. Because when we're selecting cattle, we still like carcass traits, a really high carcass trait on something will not get us to sacrifice fertility or the phenotype of a bull. I guess so. Everything's kind of important. You just with the genetic evaluations and ultrasound that are out there, it lets you add more things to your selection process that can make the cattle better that weren't there 20 years ago, right? Like in our, a scale isn't cutting edge anymore. You need to know what's under the hide to improve the whole supply chain.
And I think from my perspective, the things that are easy to measure that are really important would be carcass and growth. And then there's other important traits too, like feed conversion, but that's very challenging to measure even at the seed stock sector. So that carcass traits, like Bruce said, are quite difficult for a cow-calf producer to measure unless they have some sort of an arrangement with their calf buyer to provide that information back, which is possible, but it's, there's a lot of business model hurdles to get over to be able to do that. And then growth is a little bit easier to measure with things like weaning weight and stuff like that being, more within the control.
And I guess that's one of the biggest things is getting feedback or like to get carcass data back, because nobody's going to give it out when your cattle are doing well, because they know that as a cow-calf man, you're going to use it to market your cattle, and as you should. So it's really tough to get that information out of somebody who's fed your cattle.
I think it depends on the arrangements, Bruce. Like in our business, when we purchase the cattle, we commit to provide that data back, and so we do, no matter whether it's good or bad. I do know that that's not common, but I I do know of other programs that do that as well through full value chain alignment programs that commit to provide the carcass data back and do provide it, but they're pretty few and far between.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's definitely some that I'm aware of too that are sharing that information back. And the first time it happens, I know in one situation it's a little bit scary because maybe as the breeder, you've never received that carcass information back, but that's where you can really focus and make your greater return. And maybe you're doing something really well in the situation that I can refer back to. The value chain was able to say these animals were exactly what we need. How did you breed them? What breed makeup? And can you send us more? And the breeder kind of said, I don't keep that level of records to be able to tell you what I did different with those ones than the ones before. So there's a great example. If you're part of that integrated value chain, that you do need to be considering a record keeping solution, because knowing those answers helps you figure out your breeding and culling decisions going forward. And then I'd leave you with a thought about CBIN, because I think what you're asking, Bruce, and what some of the comments are in the Q&A really feeds into what CBIN's trying to do. And the difference now is the collaboration around that table is represented by everybody in the beef production chain. So it may be something very unique that has never happened before, but the people are all there willing to figure this out. And so if this is something that everybody wants more information in, then I encourage you to reach out to Sandy Russell.